Thank you very much for this thoughtful speech. You're calling on us as Christians to try to change this country person to person, community to community, not through our government, for example. 100 years ago, we had a national election and the whole country wasn't torn apart the way it was today. That's when the federal government was 4% of the GDP, the administrative state didn't exist, and the internet wasn't here, so we didn't have 24/7 news. We now seem to be overwhelmed by our government, by the regulatory state, and by the media itself. Where do we find the private space even to make a change within all of that?
Well, I think you've got to look at all the essentials of the American Revolution, the experiment and so on, and then say 240 years later, where are we in these? So this isn't what you asked, but I was giving a talk last week on religious freedom. You can see right down to 1993 in the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, you still had a very healthy American consensus. And in 20 years, a sea change so that America's unrecognizable on this core right. You've got the reducers, people who said that free exercise is merely freedom of worship. You've got the removers who say after 9/11, all religion is dangerous, we've got to remove it from public life, and you have the freedom from religion movement rather than freedom for religion. But the worst thing of all is the new thing we've seen in some of the Obama administration. I call them the rebranders. So Castro of the Civil Rights Commission, religious freedom is a code word for bigotry. That's appalling. He should be ashamed of himself in the light of history. So huge changes in just 20 years. Now we could look, say, at the whole notion of liberalism, the notion of libertarianism, the notion of equality. All these things which are so crucial to the revolution are experiencing incredible changes in our time. And we need to stand for something that is lasting, enduring, sustainable, and true. So you mentioned one that you could take 20 areas where we've got to make stands, or else the republic is finished.
Right, so stand for something.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Hi, I'm James. Thank you very much. I'm an administrator at Washington Christian Academy up in Maryland.
Wonderful.
Great synthesis. When you speak to young people, where do you find the entry point? I find many of our teachers are probably struggling valiantly with some of the ideas that you've articulated, but where do you find the best entry point for an 8th grader or a 9th grader? Now, sit down. Thank you very much.
To be honest, I don't go down to that level. I rarely go below university level. But the answer is, we're all human beings. We're all human beings. So I try and start with what matters to them as human beings. But I don't, to be honest, go down very, very rarely to, 12th graders. But
Oz, you wrote about the Golden Triangle a year or so ago, linking faith, freedom, and virtue. So your comments about faith and freedom up there made me think about that. What kind of reaction have you had to that since then, both within the church and from the secular world?
Slight interest. Now, let's take the framers, though, or the founders. They are routinely dismissed today for one of 4 reasons. Either, like Charles Beard and the historians say, they had an agenda. Virginia tidal plantation owners, they had an agenda. Or they had blind spots, treatment of slaves or Native Americans or women. So throw them out, baby bathwater and all, not recognizing some areas they were brilliant. Religious freedom, they got almost nearly perfectly right from the beginning. Slavery, badly wrong. But people just throw the whole thing out. Or you have the progressives, they were wonderful. But that was yesterday, and we're in a different world. Woodrow Wilson, President Obama. Progressives' idea, we've got beyond that. Or the really major problem, most Americans have just forgotten. No interest in history. You can see all these bizarre things. One of my favorite recently. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? George Washington. Oh, no. It was Abraham Lincoln. Oh, wait a minute. Churchill. I mean, you need history to have transmission. So they're dismissed. But I think people are interested in it. In other words, this generation cares about sustainability. It's a buzzword. But you can't have sustainable freedom without what I call their notion of the golden triangle.
Sure, like a lot of people here, I've served in the government and military for almost 30 years. And I wonder if you have a word for folks that are in that domain. You know, two of my heroes in the Bible are Daniel and Joseph, who served as insiders and had to navigate some real, probably gray areas. You know, you've got Joseph even using kind of a combination of his spiritual and natural gifts to enhance the power and authority of a pagan king. So I just wonder if you have any word for those of us who are insiders, and if there are any domains of our world, arts, entertainment, science, where Christians should engage, where they're not engaging.
Well, no, thank you. We should all be engaged in all those worlds where our calling takes us. But I think the main thrust, certainly Joseph, except for the kind of socialist, almost totalitarian system he brought in, but certainly Daniel, the main lesson is absolute integrity, and we can never rise higher than our integrity will allow us to rise. And the notion that this is a powerful area, so I'll be silent for a while, or I'll cut a corner here, and then when I'm really up there, I'll have power. That is a real trap. And Daniel was a man of absolute integrity all the way to the top, including his incredible trust in the sovereignty of God. And that's what you need. No, all of us should be in those places. Well done, and thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Hi.
My name is Julio, and I'm a student at American University getting my master's focusing on the Middle East. And so you mentioned that the covenant shaped Israel. And so what rang in my head was that they viewed this and understood it as a spiritual pact. As a parallel, if America understood its covenant with God as a spiritual pact, and also understood the religious and political changes in terms of, well, to take a little eschatological view, Revelation 6, 1 through 8, and Zechariah 6, 1 through 8, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which are identified by their colors. These social, religious, political movements, Catholicism, Islam, capitalism, communism, as actually governing spiritual principalities, which is confirmed by Paul. Do you think that this sort of framework would better instruct the church in reaching out to the younger generation?
That's what Francis Schaeffer would call a soup question. Not a dessert question as the clock is ticking down. Wow. People of the younger generation I've talked to do appreciate a healthy understanding of reality, certainly along the lines of Daniel, principalities and powers, the angel princes of Persia, things like that. Now, when you identify this with that, you get into areas we've got to talk about rather carefully, because, you know, this is that movement have often gone wrong, and then people say, they don't say Joe Smith was wrong, they say the Bible was wrong, but the Bible never said it. It was their applications that were wrong. So the identifications, you know, you and I would have to talk it over, and the horsemen and that sort of stuff, but a fully biblical, supernatural reality, I think that's very appealing today, because people know that there's a wickedness that is surely at some levels demonic. And the levels of supernatural power you can't just argue against. You can't just move politically against with numbers. You have to take it on in a far deeper, richer way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.